Hello everyone, this is Ashish, and today we are going to talk about a tool I recently started exploring, which is Azure Developer CLI. So it's been quite a while that Microsoft has released this tool. So far, it was kind of in most of the features were in preview mode, and now this is getting to be more matured and right now it does have a couple of features which are really useful and ready to be used in some of the production environment as well. So we'll discuss about what this tool is about and what exactly you can achieve using this tool as a developer or as an infrastructure engineer or as a DevOps professional as well. So as you can see on the screen, I have AZD command, and which gives you the help information of this CLI. So it's a CLI based tool from Microsoft, which is an open source tool. What I mean, as you can see, it helps you onboard and manage your application in Azure. So often when you deploy application on Azure, it starts with the mostly with the portal or UI way. You create your application resources, I mean services in Azure. Then you deploy your application there, maybe a .NET application, a Java application, or any programming Python application, and then you create associated services, and then you get to know that okay, this is how it is working, and then you come to the part where you have to define those infrastructure resources using infrastructure as code. You need to have a easy way to handle the redeployment, and then CI/CD pipelines, and then the configuration changes and all those things. And when you start getting into these stuffs, you have to write scripts, you have to write infrastructure as code, you have to write the orchestration tooling around these scripts so that developers can quickly use these services as and when they need. So this is the tool that helps you doing that in a bit better way, and you don't really have to create your you just have to worry about your resources that you need and the application code that you write. You don't really have to worry about how the application can be will be deployed, how the orchestration will happen, and all those things is wrapped into this tool called Azure Developer CLI. So let's get started. So when you start with Azure Developer CLI, the very first thing that you can do is you can actually use something called template. So what are those templates is that, let me show you. So I will clear this, and AZD template list. So you can list all the template available. So Microsoft and other open source community has published a couple of templates that you can easily start using them, and these templates are kind of fully baked in services for a particular use case for a particular application stack. So for example, you can see that if you want to deploy a Python application backed by Postgres as a database, and that is being deployed to Azure Container Apps, you have a template for it. So you can deploy this, you can get familiar with the infrastructure, and then you can customize that infrastructure as well, or you can replace the application itself. Then you can do some refactoring of the infrastructure resources, application, and all those things. But you can get started with this kind of a template that gives you a nice playground to get started with this tool. Similarly, you have couple of resources or couple of template. I mean, most recently they have released a lot of templates which involves around AI services. So when you want to create a kind of a ChatGPT kind of service that you want to use the AI service from Microsoft, you have the template that you can easily create using Azure Developer CLI with fully configured with infrastructure as code, pipelines and all those stuff, and you can easily just deploy it, and then later on you can refactor it. And we will come to that point, how do you refactor it, what exactly it takes to refactor these application. So let's go ahead and deploy this one of the application from here, and we can deploy, I mean, any of them, provided you have a valid subscription and you have a kind of access to the subscription that has the service available. So for example, if you want to try with the templates which involves OpenAI services, you will need to have a subscription which has the permission to deploy these services. So, or you can easily deploy services which are like not really OpenAI, but gives you a quick start. So it completely depends upon how exactly, what kind of application you want to start with, what use case you are you are going to be familiar with based on your technology stack. These are all, you can see, provided by Microsoft, but at the same time you can also have some community based templates as well. So people like us has configured a template in such a way, they have deployed a .NET eShop application with Radish cache, and now they have and they have configured it to be deployed with Azure Developer CLI, and now they have published it as a template so that others people can use it, or people like us can use it. Right now let's go ahead, and so using this template can have you can use these templates in two way. One is that you directly use the template AZD init and then name of the template. So for example, if you want to use this one, so you just copy paste and then paste it there, or similarly you can use either of them, and all these templates have the URL. So if you click on it and you go to the URL, let me show you. So this is the template for JavaScript app, and let me go to this and just give me a moment. Yeah, so you can yep, so you can see that you have this template documentation page which you can access from by clicking the the link that you get with the template. And once you click on this link, it will go to the GitHub page of that template, and you can get details of it. And then this particular page usually will have the quick start guide to use it, to use this template, or to use it locally, what are the prerequisites you need for this particular template. So for example, here it is SAP specific services, so you may need certain prerequisite. So this is one of the template. Now let's go ahead and open something useful, and here we can use any of the template. So for example, we will deploy a we can deploy a chat application which uses OpenAI service, which would be interesting to explore, and you can quickly deploy an application similar to ChatGPT. So let's go ahead and deploy this one. And to deploy this template, you can either use this template ID with this command and just paste it here, or first of all let's go to a directory. Yeah, template test. Let me see if I have, nothing is there. So one approach would be to just type name of the template here and hit on enter. So it will initialize the AZD init actually. this will just initialize this template. Or you can, if you are not sure about the template name, you can just type in AZD in it, and then it will ask you, do you want to use do you have an application in the current directory for which you want to create a Azure Developer CLI template, or you want to select a template. So right now we will select a template, and here you can see it is asking, it is going to initialize a Git repository in this particular folder. So click on yes, yes, and now it will give you all the list of template that we just saw using AZD template list command. So here we can select that template that we want to deploy. So we can deploy a ChatGPT solution, and here is the simple chat application using Azure OpenAI. So this will deploy a ChatGPT solution using OpenAI, and when I click on it, it will ask us to name the environment. So when you deploy a template, it creates an environment which is accessible on your which is where you are deploying, and based on this environment name, actually it is going to create the resource names and resource group names and all those things. So I'll say AZD template demo and just hit on enter, and this has initialized the template. And now if I'll do ls, you can see a couple of files has been created. And if we have a look on this file, and let's go to the AZD, yep. So if we go to this folder, this directory, and we can see this, we have a couple of files. Now let's have a look on these files in a Visual Studio. So in Visual Studio, you can see these files has been created recently using the AZD init template command. And in this file, there are a couple of folders, that are very special. So first folder is .azure folder, which contains the name of the environment. If you remember, we created an environment called, where is this? So we named the environment name AZD template demo, and you can see there is a directory AZD template demo, and in that you have an environment file, and this environment file contains some environment variables. This is one of the environment variable that we have, Azure environment name. Now this is a kind of a file which is local to you. It is not something that you will push to the Git repository, and that's the reason you can see that git ignore has it is not going to commit anything from here. So it is a local environment file for you, that so when you create resources using this environment file, this environment, it will be very, very specific to this environment. This is very much similar to local environment file for other application development projects. Now this is related to environment. Now you have dev container. We are not going to talk about that tool. So it is a local container development environment that you can have. .github is typical GitHub folder, workflow folder where you have GitHub actions. We are not going to discuss right now. Yes, this is a very, very useful thing for Azure Developer CLI, but right now let's skip this part. We will come to this point when we are talking about CI/CD. The next important thing is infrastructure. So infra folder contains all the infrastructure definition in bicep format. So this particular template uses bicep, Azure bicep, to deploy your infrastructure. But Azure Developer CLI also supports Terraform configuration. They recently started supporting Terraform with a kind of a general availability. So that is also supported, and in upcoming session we will talk about Terraform as well. Actually, my book will have a dedicated chapter for this. I'm writing a book for infrastructure as code using Terraform, and then in that I have a chapter for deploying resources using Azure Developer CLI using Terraform and Azure Developer CLI. Yeah. Okay, so we have this infrastructure which contains all the infrastructure files, and the main thing is this main.bicep file, which contains all the definition of infrastructure. Now, if you're new to bicep, I would recommend you to watch my training series on bicep. I am kind of in between there, so I have added a couple of lessons there to get you started. If you are very new to bicep, I highly recommend you there. From the basic I have started, and then you can easily make sense out of it how things are being deployed using bicep. Okay, so this is the bicep file that is there, and then you have a parameter file which contains all the parameters. We are not going to dig down what kind of resources are being deployed. The main point here is to understand how the Azure Developer CLI works. Now, once you have this infrastructure, then this source folder contains all the application source, the apps. So here you can see it's a Python application, so you can see all the Python source code, and you have like all the Python specific application code. We will not get inside it, but this is what your developer will mostly work with. They don't have to deal with the infrastructure folder, they don't have to deal with any other folder, they just have to work on their application, and then rest of the things will be taken care by Azure Developer CLI. Azure Developer CLI understand how to make use of src folder, how to make use of infra folder, how to make use of .azure folder, and how it knows using this Azure YAML file. So Azure YAML file is a manifest file which is interpreted by the Azure Developer CLI. So Azure Developer CLI look for the Azure YAML file and try to understand what exactly you are going to do. So in this Azure YAML file, the first thing is that what is the name of this application, the template, you can version it. Right now it is simple ChatGPT, whatever, but you can version it as you may want. Then part comes the services. Now services is something related to your application. So here we have a service named ACA, and we have and this ACA, we have the project in this folder. So that's how Azure Developer CLI understand where is your source code, where is your application source code, how to build it, what language you have, and what exactly kind of service that you are going to deploy. So Azure Developer CLI does not support all the different resource types in Azure. So right now it is only supporting certain types of resources or certain types of host services that can be deployed to host your application. So container app is one of them. You have function app, you have web app. These are the few services that you can use to host your application. Azure Kubernetes Services is also supported. Let me open up this Azure Developer CLI. So here is the documentation, and in the documentation, if I go to the, let me show you, not here, I think reference, not there. Think, yeah, in the YAML you have somewhere, yeah, so in the services you have host, yeah, so here you have host. All these services are supported. So app service, container app, function app, static web app, AKS. These are the few hosting services which are one of the, some of the most popular hosting environment for your web application. that are supported using Azure Developer CLI. So if you are hosting your application on a virtual machine, Azure Container, Azure Developer CLI does not support that kind of host by default. So this is, let me go back to the YAML file again. So this service thing defines your service. So it defines the application that you want to host, what would be the name of your application, and this is again for symbolic use, and what exactly this will be used for, I will just come to that point. And then where is your source code, what language you are using. Again, language also it is supporting. Let me go back again. So for language you have support for .NET, C#, F#, Python, JS, TS and Java. So these are some of the most popular languages that are used for developing web applications. So these are supported with Azure Developer CLI. Now coming back to the YAML again. Where is the YAML? Yep. Then your host, as we said, this is the resource type where you need to host your application, and as you can see, it's these are the few services are supported right now. Now comes to the hooks. So hooks are kind of way to tell so when you use Azure Developer CLI, Azure Developer CLI works in a particular flow. So it provisions the resources, it builds your application, and then it deploys your application. So in between, if you want to do certain specific tasks, you want to run a PowerShell command, you want to run a shell script. So for those kind of hooks, you have hooks thing, and hook you can use for pre, post, and you have different kind of hooks for, and they are attached to pre and post. So every event has a pre and every event has a post. Now let's go back to the types of hooks supported by this YAML. And in hooks, so let's go back, and in the hook you can see these are the hooks that are available. So you can define pre-restore, post-restore. So when application is restoring its dependencies, you can run certain things before it restore, pre-restore, and you can run something, a PowerShell script or a bash command or something like that, post restore. Similarly, you can do pre-provision and post-provision. So when you deploy, when you run AZD commands to deploy services in Azure, there is a AZD provision command which runs. We will talk about the commands in a bit, but before provisioning the resources and after provisioning the resources, you can run certain things, and that's the one we are using. Similarly, you have pre-deploy and post-deploy. So before deploying your application, after deploying your application, pre-up, post-up. So up command is there that start the deployment of resources and deployment of application on the resources and all those things. So you can do pre-up and post-up as well. And these are these are the hooks that are available to you, pre-down and post-down. So pre-down and post-down is again before destroying all the resources. So down is command that you use to destroy all the resources. Pre-down, as the name suggests, before destroying. Post-down, after destroying. So that's what the hooks you have. And here we have hooks. Again, hooks also allow you to define based on platform. So on Windows, what you want to run, and on POSIX types of environment what you want to run. So in Windows you will run a PowerShell command and you do all these things. So this essentially is actually kind of outputting the environment values, and similarly it is doing the environment pushing out the environment values into the .env file. So this is the kind of hooks that you can use, and this entire Azure services, Azure.yaml file defines your deployment of resources. Now Let's go ahead and start the deployment for this. Now the easiest way to deploy resources in your from your template is, let me go ahead and clear this. So again, so we are in the same folder where we have the template, and the easiest way is AZD up. So AZD up is a command that is kind of set of command which is kind of deploys resources in Azure. When you do AZD up, it asks for your subscription, where if you are already logged in, then it will ask you for the subscription. If you are not logged in, then possibly you first have to log in and then you have to select the subscription. If you have multiple subscription attached to your account in Azure, you will need to select one of the subscription where you want to deploy resources. So I'll select the first one, and the next part is where exactly you want to deploy resources. So I want to deploy in East US, and then it starts deploying. I mean, possibly if so it has started deploying resources. And how it is deploying the resources? Using the Azure.yaml file. And if we look at again to the environment file, you can see there are a couple of environment that has been added now. So you can see subscription ID, you can see location, you can see environment name. So this all has been added to the environment which will be used by the Azure.yaml and the Azure Developer CLI internally to deploy resources to Azure. So let's wait for this to finish. So this will take some time, and you can see there is a link, and I can click on it and it will open the portal. Let me open the portal. So it's deploying resources like Log Analytics Workspace, and how it's deploying, let me show you in the infra folder. If you go there, you have this main, and in this main you have different resources. So you have like cognitive services, which is defined by this, and then if you go to this definition, you can see all these services are being defined here. Similarly, you have other resources like container apps. So if I go to the definition, I can see what resources is deploys. It deploys a container registry. Again, go to the definition and you can see what is the definition of container registry. So this is kind of a default or I mean coming from a template. Now usually, let me just go back. So usually you may not need this kind of comprehensive resources for every template that you deploy, or maybe for every template that you share with your developers. So for example, in the monitor, you have a Log Analytics Workspace that is being deployed on this application. Now usually in your organization, you may not want to have a Log Analytics Workspace for each application, for each template deployment. You may want to consolidate it, and that's where it is coming to the infrastructure part, where you need to refactor this infrastructure. So you need not to use the as it is infrastructure definition that is coming from the template, even if this application is somehow the same thing that you want to use, but it's not exactly the same, all the resources that you do not want to use as it is. So for example, you may have a shared registry instead of registry creating on each deployment for each application. So this is a ChatGPT application you are deploying. Maybe tomorrow you want to deploy another AI service application which should be using the same centralized container registry instead of creating a new container registry. So for those kind of infrastructure definition, you may have to refactor this in infrastructure definition so that you can align with your organizational infrastructure requirements. And that's where Azure Developer CLI is not just for developers. It's a very great tool for infrastructure engineers who can define their templates and serve these templates to their developers, and developers can use them with the definition of infrastructure that has been defined by the infrastructure teams, DevOps team, infrastructure team, whatever you may call. And so developers can be sure that they are deploying services in a compliant way, configured with all the infrastructure component that is defined by the infrastructure team. So we will come to this kind of refactoring in maybe next session. But yes, I was just talking about the possibilities of doing things with Azure Developer CLI for infrastructure engineers. So it's still deploying, it's deploying the services now. So as you can see, all the resources has been deployed now, and now it's deploying the services. And as soon as the services are deployed, and it is deployed actually, so we'll go to the container apps, and we go to the container apps, and if I have just opened it, and if we go to the URL, this should be the ChatGPT. I mean, not exactly the OpenAI ChatGPT, but the ChatGPT of our own. So it's still kind of figuring out. Yeah, it's still deploying. So it's there in Azure, but still kind of deploying the service, pushing the container image. So it will soon be available. Let's wait for some time. Yeah, let's wait this one to finish, and then we can have a look. Okay, so updating container app. So this is the tool to deploy services in one-click deployment model. Now, not just deployment, but it also, and we have the link now, and if we click on it, let's close this one, then it should open this. Yeah, while it is kind of warming up, let's have a look on one more thing that I want to discuss about. So it's not just deployment, you can even configure your CI/CD pipelines, and it has kind of a CI/CD pipeline already configured for you if you're coming from a template, but you can also configure your own CI/CD pipeline depending upon how exactly you want to define that, what kind of steps what kind of stages you want to have, how do you want to design the pipeline deployment. Those things you can define, and it is possible to define a pipeline for Azure DevOps. It is possible to define a pipeline for GitHub Action. It is completely up to you how exactly you want to define. So it completely gives you a way to define end-to-end infrastructure and application deployment for your developers. So essentially, if your team works in a very collaborative way, then infrastructure teams or DevOps teams can define their infrastructure component, CI/CD component, and other things in a template, and can serve these templates just like we just use the AZD template list. It can be served to their teams internally, both using this approach, or there is another service called Azure deployment environment. We will talk about that in next session. So Azure deployment environment is another way of giving a self-service model to your developers, and that Azure deployment environment supports Azure Developer CLI template. So you can define your template, do all these testing, then push it as a Azure deployment environment template, and then that can be used. We will talk about that. That itself kind of needs a separate session, so we will not get details, but essentially it's a very nice way of using a self-service model in a very intuitive way for your developers within organization. Okay, so it's still thinking. Let's see. Yep. So you have this and it looks like it's there, but what's happening? Why it's not opening? Let's open it again. Okay. This is interesting. Why? Let me open it in a new window. Oh, it's there. I could not see it. So it's there, but because I have zoom, yeah, so here it is. So, and you can see, hi, can you tell me what is Azure Developer CLI? And it should tell me. So, yep. So is it provided by Microsoft, and will it be good to provide this tool to developers in my organization? Just a kind of showing you, yes, these are the benefits. So yes, I mean, this is a kind of a, a tool that you can use. I just showed you how to quickly create your own ChatGPT kind of application using Azure Developer CLI, which abstract all the infrastructure and application from you, and you just focus on your respective section of the resources. So for example, if you look at this again, so if you are a Azure infrastructure guy, or DevOps guy, you will mostly look into the infrastructure folder, and you would like to see how these infrastructure components are designed, defined, and how you can customize it so that it meets the organizational requirements, such as shared repository, Azure Container Registry, shared log analytics workspace, maybe shared security models, and all those things where you can keep it as it is need to be from the organizational point of view. But at the same time, as a developer, you don't need to look into this folder. Rather, you will look into your application and you work on your application, you develop your application, change your application, quickly deploy your application in a sandbox environment from your local machine without worrying about how the infrastructure is deployed, what are the things you need in Azure. You just need to have a sandbox Azure subscription from your organization so that you can deploy that, and then you can dev test end to end. And if you are fine with it, you can further configure a CI/CD pipeline, and that can be deployed to a environment which is production, where you don't have access to access it locally. And this is the kind of a flow you can define or design based on your organizational requirement. So this is it from the Azure Developer CLI. Next thing we will be discussing about is that so today we discussed about a template. Now the next thing that we are going to discuss about is that suppose you have an application. So if I open the window and I'll open a folder here, yes, so this one has a application. So I have an existing application, a .NET simple .NET application, and if I go here and do this .NET run, oops, see, yep, so yeah, so as you can see, there is no Azure YAML, there is no Azure folder, there is no Azure environment, there is nothing, no environment or Azure Developer CLI specific files. So we have an application which typically any developer will have an application. This is a very simple application, a .NET application, but you can have a complex application. I don't care, but you once you have the application, then you want to have this deployed into Azure using Azure Developer CLI. Right now it will not work, so let me close this. Right now it will not work, of course. AZD up, no, let me go back, and if I do AZD up, that I did last time, it will not work because there is no AZD specifiers, and it is asking you run AZD init. And if I do AZD init, again it will scan the directory and it will create a file, but I don't want to do this right now. We will do this in the next session, where we will generate AZD files, then refactor it for our need, and then we deploy it in the Azure. That's what we are going to do next session. It is already more than 40 minutes now, so this is enough for today. Yep, so today we discussed about Azure Container, Azure Developer CLI. We used Azure Developer CLI to deploy Azure Container apps that deploys a ChatGPT application on Azure, and this is what we discussed, that helps you to quickly deploy resources in Azure in a very quick way, and in a very infrastructure as code and a DevOps oriented approach, or you can say self-serve model for developers. I mean, whatever way you can say, but it is actually about improving your developer inner loop, where they can quickly deploy resources, they can quickly use the services in Azure without worrying about complexity of infrastructure. That's what Azure Developer CLI is all about. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.